Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another scary story. Your place where we uncover the darkest mysteries in a calming and reflective way. For the next hour, I want you to put on your earphones, put your phone face down, and close your eyes. Relax, and let this story take you to a world full of chills and mystery. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. Now get comfortable and relax. I've lived in Blackthorn Cottage longer than I care to remember. Longer than I should have, really. People think I'm strange and I don't blame them. I haven't left my house in, well, I don't know how long. Days? Years? Time doesn't pass the same when you've been stuck in a place like this for as long as I have. The house doesn't let you forget it either. It's always there. Always hungry. Willow Lane is the last road in Gallows Hollow, a crumbling strip of cracked asphalt that the town's few remaining residents avoid like the plague. The streetlights flicker and die one by one, leaving it a dark ribbon of blackness at the edge of the woods. You can hear the wind in the trees, and there's always that smell in the air. Damp earth, copper, and something older. Something wrong. It's the scent of the town itself, a stench of rot that's buried deep in the soil. The cottage, my home, is a thing of decay. Ivy crawls over the stone walls, creeping into every crack like a living thing. The roof sags in places, and the windows are fogged with age, the glass warped and hazy like the world outside is already a dream. The front door is creaky and swollen with moisture. The floorboards inside creak beneath my feet, and the walls hum sometimes, soft and faint like a whisper in the dead of night. But no one comes here. No one has for years. They've all heard the stories about the disappearances, the odd things that happen after the sun sets. They've heard the rumors about me, Clara Voss, the woman who never ages, and they're right, of course, I don't age. Not like them. I haven't in decades, but I was there when they filled the mass grave behind this house. I was there when they buried all those bodies, layer after layer of forgotten souls, their bones pressed together like nothing more than kindling. They didn't bury them to rest. They buried them to feed the land, to feed the house. I didn't have a choice in the matter. The house chose me. It called to me even when I was just a girl. It always knew I would come, and when I did, it kept me. It promised me everything: longevity, health, life, and it kept that promise. But in return, it demands something. It always demands something. Every few years, a lost soul finds its way to my door. They stumble in, sometimes desperate, sometimes unaware, but always in need of shelter. And I let them in. I have no choice. The house demands it. I have to feed. It's the only way to keep it happy, and the house is always hungry. Always. I remember the first time it happened. I was young, just a girl, when I heard the knock on my door. My mother was gone, and my father was lost to the shadows of the world long before that. It was just me and the house then. And when the knock came, I didn't hesitate. I invited him in. He was a stranger, but that's the way it goes. He wasn't the first, and he wouldn't be the last. Now, as the years stretch on, the house has a way of growing on you. The walls start whispering at night, things I can't understand, but I know it's hungry. I know it wants something. It always wants something. I can hear it now. The soft whisper of the walls, the breath beneath the floorboards. I can't tell you how many times I've been awake at night. The house calling out for its payment, the thing in the walls growing restless. It grows hungrier with each passing year. And when the hunger becomes unbearable, that's when the knocking comes, again. And then the door opens. It was a night like any other. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows and whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. The walls hummed with that familiar low buzz, an uncomfortable presence that kept me on edge. I sat by the fire, the orange glow casting long dancing shadows across the room, and tried to ignore the sense of waiting in the air. There was something wrong. I could feel it in my bones. And then there was a knock. It was sharp and urgent, the kind of knock that wakes you from a deep sleep, even though I hadn't been asleep. I knew who it was before I even moved. I didn't need to hear the footsteps outside or the ragged breathing that seemed to come from the direction of the porch. I knew what was about to happen. I walked to the door, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for the handle. I didn't want to open it. I knew what would come with it. But the house was already urging me, pushing me toward the door, and I could feel the hunger in the air, thick and heavy. When I opened the door, he was there. A man, tall and gaunt, his clothes torn and covered in dirt. His eyes were wide, too, wide, almost wild, and his pupils were so black I could barely see the whites. Blood stained his shirt, and his face was pale, like he'd been running for days. He collapsed in front of me, barely able to stand. "Please," he rasped, his voice raw. "Please help me." He looked like he was in pain, but the hunger in his eyes, it wasn't just the fear of someone being chased. No, this was something else, something darker, something familiar. "You have to let me in," he said, almost pleading now. "They're after me, I can hear them. Behind me. Please." The house shifted behind me, a subtle creak in the floorboards, as though it was eager. I knew the rules. I had no choice. I had to let him in. I stepped aside, and he stumbled over the threshold, collapsing to the floor. The moment he crossed the doorframe, the air shifted. He was part of it now. Part of the house. I shut the door behind him, and as I turned to face him, I saw his eyes flicker toward the walls, toward the corners of the room where the shadows lingered. He looked different now, not just exhausted, but aware. "I hear it," he muttered, barely audible. "It's breathing. The walls." I froze. He shouldn't have known that. No one ever knows. The house keeps its secrets. But this man, Elias Harker, knew something. He knew exactly what was happening here. The walls whispered, low and insistent, and for the first time in years I felt something close to fear. I found Elias in the parlor, curled up in the high-backed chair that faced the fire. He hadn't slept. I could tell by the way his hands gripped the arms of the chair, white-knuckled, tendons taut. His eyes had a far-off look, like he'd been staring at something too long. Something not quite real. "I can make tea," I offered, trying to sound normal. I'd always found that tea helped, or at least gave me something to do with my hands. He didn't answer, just kept staring at the wall to his left, the one where the wallpaper peeled back slightly at the baseboard. I'd tried to paste it down dozens of times over the years. Never held. "You said it's breathing," I prompted gently, setting the kettle on the rusted iron stove. He turned toward me slowly. His pupils were still too wide, even in the warm light of the fire. "It's not just breathing," he said, voice low. "It's watching me. It knows I'm not like the others, doesn't it?" I stiffened. "What others?" "You've done this before," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. He stood up, slow and deliberate, walking to the wall. His hand hovered just above the peeling wallpaper, then pressed flat against it. "There's something behind here," he whispered. "Alive." "It's just an old house," I said, too quickly. The lie tasted sour in my mouth. Elias turned to me. "No, Clara, it isn't," the kettle screamed. I turned away, poured the water, tried to act like I wasn't unraveling inside. Elias didn't drink. The tea instead, he started pacing, watching the walls, tapping his fingers against them as if listening for a response. "I remember this place," he muttered. "I've been here before." I set my cup down. "You said someone was chasing you." He nodded absently, as if the thought had drifted far away. "They followed me through the woods, but they stopped before I hit the lane, like they were afraid of something, afraid of this place." He looked back at the wall, the peeling spot he'd been drawn to all night. "I think I know why." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You don't want to know. But he did. People like Elias always do. They're drawn to the dark corners, to the quiet creaks and shifting floorboards. They can't help themselves. He peeled back the wallpaper, slow at first, then faster as the paste gave way. The wall underneath wasn't just old plaster. It pulsed. I swear to God, it pulsed. Like something underneath it had a heartbeat. Then I saw them. Small ridges beneath the paint, like bones. Or worse. He ran his fingers over the shapes and flinched. Teeth, he whispered. The house groaned, loud and sudden. The air changed again, thick, electric. I could feel it in my chest, like pressure before a storm. You've been feeding them, Elias said, eyes wide. I had no choice. I snapped. You think I want this? You think I like it? The lights flickered. From the basement came a faint scratching sound, slow, rhythmic, familiar. Elias backed away from the wall, from me. What's in the basement? I shook my head. You don't want to know. But I do, he said. Because I've seen this before. My grandfather used to talk about a house that ate people, a cottage that breathed. He was half mad, but he kept a photo. Said the woman in it never changed. My stomach dropped. He said her name was Clara. The room spun for a moment. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Where is this photo? He reached into his coat, pulled out a small, creased photograph. It was me. The date scrawled, on the back, October 1923. I didn't remember the picture being taken, but it was me. Same hollow eyes, same worn dress, same damn house. Elias was still staring at the wall, and I knew what would come next. He'd ask to leave. The house wouldn't. Let him, and I couldn't stop it. Elias wouldn't stop pacing. It was nearly morning, but the darkness still pressed against the windows like heavy drapes. No birdsong, no wind. Just the creak of the floorboards under his boots and the slow, hungry groan of the house. I sat at the edge of the sofa watching him. My tea had long gone cold. I hadn't touched it since he pulled that damn photograph from his coat. Every second he was still in my house, I could feel the walls tightening around us. I need to see it, he said finally, his voice more grounded now, calmer. Dangerous. No, I replied. He turned to face me. Then I'm going down there, myself. You won't make it down 3 steps. Elias laughed, short, humorless. Try me. And there it was, the moment I always feared. The ones who figure it out always want the same thing. The truth, the worst kind of hunger. You think I'm some kind of monster, I said quietly, standing. But I didn't ask for this. I was chosen. By what? I looked at the ceiling, the peeling paint, the cracks like veins running through old plaster. By the house or whatever's inside it. Elias looked toward the hall, then the locked cellar door at the end of it. You feed it, people. No, I said. I let it choose. It calls to them. The drifters, the runaways, the broken ones like you. He went still. I didn't invite you here, I said. You came pounding on my door. You crossed the threshold. You gave yourself to it. His eyes narrowed. So that's it? You let it eat people because it suits your peace and quiet? No, I snapped, louder than I meant to. Because if I don't, it takes me. The words hung there. He looked toward the wall again, toward the ridges of bone he'd uncovered, and I could see it click behind his eyes. Maybe not understanding, not completely, but accepting. A terrible kind of acceptance. I need to see it, he said again. Softer this time. The cellar key was kept in the drawer next to the stove. Brass, cold, felt heavier than it should have. My hand shook when I held it out. You're not going to stop me, he asked. No point, I said. It already knows you're coming. He took the key, and I followed him down the hall, bare feet on splintered wood. When he unlocked the door and swung it open, the smell hit us both like a slap in the face. Rot and mildew and iron. The stink of old things. The stairs creaked with every step, but the basement didn't echo. It swallowed sound, swallowed light too. The bulb overhead flickered weakly, casting the stairs in amber before fading out completely. Elias lit a match. The shadows danced on the walls, crude drawings in ash and soot, scratch marks trailing down the stone. "What is this place?" he whispered. I stayed on the top step. "It's a mouth." And then it growled. Not loud, not a roar. Just this low, wet groan that came from the earth beneath the house like something rolling in its sleep. Elias stepped back, but it was too late. The door behind him slammed shut. The lock twisted, not by me, I hadn't touched it. He turned, pounding on the door. "Clara, open it!" "I can't." From the dark, something moved. I couldn't see it, but I felt the pressure change. Felt it like a shift in gravity, like the house exhaling. Elias pressed his back to the wall, gasping, trying to strike another match. The match wouldn't catch. He began to scream, not out of fear, out of rage. Like if he yelled loud enough, he could undo whatever curse had dragged him into my world. Then silence. The screaming stopped. The air lightened. I unlocked the door slowly. Elias was gone. Only his boots remained, standing upright on the dusty stone floor. I walked down, placed his photograph on the old altar at the center of the room. Stone slab carved long before the house was ever built. Blood flaked across the grooves. The walls pulsed again. Satisfied. I didn't sleep. I never do after a feeding. The house goes quiet. Too quiet. The silence after a soul's been taken is heavier than the screaming. I sat in the kitchen, staring at Elias's coat draped across the chair. The fire had died in the stove. My tea had gone cold again. The walls were breathing slow now, sated, like some great beast curling up after a long meal. I didn't cry. I never do. But something about Elias, it lingered. Maybe it was the photograph. The way he looked at me like he knew me. Not just as the woman who let him in, but as someone he'd been looking for. Someone from a story told too many times in the dark. I kept hearing his voice. "You've been feeding them." Like I had a choice. The house had kept me alive for over a century. When the Great War ended, when the town shrank, when everyone else either died or ran, I stayed. Because I had to. I don't know if it's magic or a curse or something older than either. All I know is the house gave me time, but it made me earn it. And then came the knock. 3 taps. Soft, measured, like fingers too small for the door. I froze. It was nearly dawn again. A pale blue light was starting to peel through the edges of the curtain, but the knock didn't sound like dawn. It sounded like hunger. "Help me," came a voice. Small, shaking, a child. My heart stopped. I stood slowly, knees popping from too many years carrying guilt. I crossed the room, each step echoing in my ears. "Please," the child whispered again. "They're coming." I stared at the door. The house behind me moaned, not loud, not angry, just eager. "I can't," I whispered to no one. But the rules are the rules. If they knock, if they cross the threshold of their own will, if the house wants them, it's done. I placed my hand on the knob. It was warm. I could feel the pulse of the wood under my palm. The house was alive. It was listening. And I couldn't do it. Not this time. Not a child. So I backed away. And the door unlocked on its own. The latch slid. The hinges groaned. The door creaked open, and there he stood. Barefoot. Maybe 8 years old, covered in dirt. Hair stuck to his forehead with sweat and dried blood. He looked up at me with wide brown eyes. "Clara," he said. I stopped breathing. I'd never seen him before. I shouldn't have known him. But something in those eyes pulled at a memory buried so deep I'd long forgotten it. "My name's Jonah," he said. And then he handed me something, a yellowed newspaper clipping, torn at the edges. A headline from 1923. Missing boy found. Dead in Gallows Hollow, Jonah Voss, 8, disappeared from home. I fell to my knees. That name. That year. Voss. My family. The house hadn't just been feeding. It had been feeding on us, on my bloodline, every lost soul who knocked. They were coming back, again and again, the same souls, reborn, returned, consumed, and I'd been the gatekeeper. Looked at Jonah, the boy who bore my name. Who was me once? Or maybe a brother, a child I'd forgotten, a life erased by the house's hunger. I reached for his hand. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The house howled. The windows shattered. The walls pulsed and cracked, teeth gnashing through the plaster. The floor split open beneath us, revealing the thing beneath, the mouth raw and gaping, screaming in a voice I'd heard in dreams. "No more," I said, standing, and I stepped into the mouth. I pulled Jonah close, held him tight, and let it take me instead. The deal was always blood, but no one ever said it had to be theirs. The house still stands on Willow Lane, empty now. Locals say they saw flames one morning, but nothing was ever found. No fire damage, no smoke, just silence. The knocks stopped after that, and somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, where roots twist around forgotten bones, the house sleeps. And for once, it's full. I've always been drawn to things that are forgotten. My career as a freelance archivist had begun as a way to make ends meet, but quickly turned into something more. The musty scent of old paper, the soft rustle of brittle pages. It felt more like a calling than a job. Most people don't understand the pull. They see old books and letters as clutter, useless relics of a bygone era. But to me, they were the last whisper of lives lived, of stories untold. I spent my days hunched over desks and tables in libraries and antique stores, meticulously restoring manuscripts. The people who hired me often had no idea of the dark things I uncovered in the pages, the hidden scribbles, the annotations, the cryptic lines that others overlooked. But for me, they were pieces of a puzzle no one else was interested in solving. It's funny, really. In a world that's obsessed with the present, I felt the most alive when immersed in the past. Maybe that's because the past never changes. It's done, sealed in time, and that's the way I liked it. Sealed like the lid of a coffin. No surprises, but I should have known better. The strange thing, the thing I couldn't explain, is how I found myself living in St. Mortimer's. Apartments. A crumbling building with its broken brick walls and warped floorboards. It was cheap at least, and had just enough space for me to spread out my collection of ancient texts. But I never liked it here. I couldn't place it, but something about the air, the humidity mixed with the sickly sweetness of mildew, made me uneasy. It was always just a little too still, like the house was holding its breath, waiting. I wasn't entirely alone. I had neighbors, of course, though I rarely saw them. The woman across the hall, Mrs. Pierce, had lived here as long as I had. She worked at the local diner. I'd wave at her occasionally, but we rarely spoke. Then there was Martin, a wiry guy, in his late 20s who lived next door. I didn't know much about him other than that he played loud music at odd hours. But he kept to himself, like I did. Still, my insomnia kept me up most nights, pacing the apartment, sometimes listening to the faint scraping sounds coming from somewhere in the building. I'd convinced myself it was the house settling, but it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the silence of the place. It was the way the shadows seemed to move on their own. One evening, around dusk, the mail arrived. I hadn't expected anything of note, just bills, old catalogs, and whatever junk people thought I'd buy. But there, lying on the doormat, was a package. No return address. It wasn't much to look at, just a simple, water-stained brown envelope. I picked it up with a curiosity I couldn't explain. Inside, there was a leather-bound journal. The first thing I noticed was how heavy it was, how ancient it felt in my hands. I ran my fingers over the cover, smooth but cracked, like it had been handled by countless others before me. The pages, yellowed with age, smelled faintly of something sweet and rotten, like forgotten fruit. The first entry, written in a tight, frantic script, caught my eye. The ink had blurred in places, but the words were still legible. "Tonight I will open the door. The Hollow Man comes at midnight." I stared at the words, a shiver creeping up my spine. My hands shook as I flipped through the rest of the journal. The entries grew more erratic, more desperate, until they reached the point where they were filled with strange rituals, names scratched out in blood, and ramblings about a family crypt beneath Redford's Black Church Cemetery. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. This wasn't just some old book. It felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. And that's when I heard it. The soft, dragging sound coming from the fire escape outside my window. I froze. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The dragging sound grew louder, as if something was inching its way up the rusted metal ladder outside. I slowly turned my head toward the window, my pulse quickening. When I looked out, I saw nothing, just the dark expanse of the alley below. But the window was smeared with black fingerprints. I took a step back, heart pounding in my chest. The journal was still in my hand. It felt heavier now, as if something were trying to drag it away from me. My mind raced. Could it be real? Was someone watching me? But there was no time to think. The whispering of the pipes, the dragging on the fire escape, the strange black fingerprints, they all felt like pieces of something bigger. Something I had just stumbled into. And then, I heard the voice. A whisper, faint at first, as though it were coming from somewhere far below. But it was clear enough to make me freeze in my tracks. "You're late, Daniel." The sound of my name whispered in the darkness made my blood run cold. I looked at the journal again, but it didn't seem possible. I hadn't even opened the crypt yet. How could they know? I backed away slowly from the window, the words of the journal swirling in my mind. The Hollow Man was waiting, and so was I. But I had no idea how far I would have to go to uncover the truth. I couldn't sleep that night. The shadows in the room seemed too thick, as if they were waiting, watching. I kept my eyes on the journal, the leather cover now seeming more sinister under the flickering light of the desk lamp. It felt like a curse wrapped in parchment, like something that had been bound together with a purpose I couldn't yet understand. My fingers hovered over the first entry again, the words still echoing in my head. The Hollow Man comes at midnight. Couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into something much older than me. My great-great-uncle, Elias Voss, had vanished in 1893. He had been suspected of practicing dark arts, occult rituals, the kind that most dismissed as superstition. The town had long whispered about Elias's strange interests, his reclusive nature, and his obsession with something he called the Hollow Man. But the family had never spoken of him, and my grandfather, who had been the last to trace our family tree, refused to elaborate. I'd always chalked it up to family rumors. People around here loved to gossip, especially about the Voss family. I didn't think much of it, but tonight, something was different. It was as if the air around me had thickened, and all I could do was breathe it in. I set the journal down and walked across the room, peering out the window into the dark alley below. The dragging sound was gone, but the strange feeling hadn't dissipated. My reflection stared back at me from the window pane, gaunt, hollow-eyed, looking like someone who had been up far too long. I hardly recognized myself. The clock struck midnight. I didn't know why it startled me, but it did. My pulse quickened as I turned back to the desk, my mind racing. That's when it happened. A sound, muffled at first, came from deep within the building. A faint scraping. My stomach churned as I recognized it. The same dragging sound I had heard earlier. This time it was inside the building. Slowly, cautiously, I moved toward the door and peered out into the hallway. It was empty, but there, at the far end of the hallway, was something else. A shadow stretched unnaturally long, creeping toward me. It paused just in front of my door, and I froze. The air became thick with the same rotten, sweet smell that clung to the journal. The shadow stayed there for a moment, and then it was gone. My heart hammered in my chest. I backed away from the door, too afraid to open it. My mind raced, desperate to make sense of the situation. Had it all been in my head? But no. The journal, Elias Voss, it was the only link I had to the madness that had begun unraveling around me. I thought of the crypt beneath Blackchurch Cemetery, where the journal had said something terrible was buried. Elias had left me a clue, a message, and I couldn't ignore it. I had to find it. I had to understand what Elias had been chasing. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I gathered my things, grabbed my coat, and made my way toward Blackchurch Cemetery, determined to find the answers. But in my gut, I knew I wasn't just chasing answers anymore. I was being pulled deeper into something that had been waiting for me all this time. The night air was sharp as I stepped outside, the streets of Redford eerily quiet under the cover of darkness. My breath came in shallow gasps, and each step I took seemed heavier than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The shadows around me felt more alive than they ever had, as if they were curling in on themselves, watching, waiting. The Blackchurch Cemetery wasn't far. I had driven past it countless times, its iron gates rusted and its gravestones weathered by time. People rarely went there, partly because it was an old cemetery, and partly because the place had a reputation. Local legend held that the graveyard was cursed, haunted by restless spirits, or worse, depending on who you asked. It was the kind of place you didn't wander into after dark. But tonight, I didn't care about legends. I was chasing something deeper, something personal. My great-great-uncle Elias had written about it in the journal, something hidden beneath the cemetery, something that had been waiting for over a century. The crypt, the Hollow Man. I parked my car at the edge of the cemetery, just outside the broken gates. The land was still except for the distant rustling of leaves. The air smelled of damp earth and decay, and the faint hum of the town behind me seemed like a distant memory. I stepped into the graveyard, the gravel crunching beneath my boots as I walked past crumbling headstones. The place was older than the town itself, with the oldest graves dating back to the 1600s. It felt like a place untouched by time, a place where history and death were buried together in forgotten corners. I wandered deeper into the cemetery, the words from the journal echoing in my mind. The family crypt. I had to find it. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon the crypt. It was tucked away in the farthest corner, nearly obscured by overgrown ivy and twisted vines. The stone door, weathered and cracked, looked as if it hadn't been opened in years, maybe decades. But I knew it was the right place. The journal had led me here. I could feel it. I approached the crypt and ran my fingers over the cold stone. The engravings on the surface were faint, but I could still make out the name etched above the entrance. Voss. Elias's family, tied to this place, tied to whatever madness had been left behind. The door was unlocked. I hesitated. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn back, to leave this place untouched. But the pull of the journal of Elias's words was too strong. I had come too far to turn away now. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open. The air inside was thick, with dust, the smell of death and decay more pronounced. The floor was uneven, and the walls were covered in strange symbols that mirrored the madness written in the journal. The further I moved into the crypt, the more I felt like I was being swallowed by the earth itself. In the center of the room, there was a hole in the floor. It was circular, just wide enough for a man to crawl through, and from the darkness below, I heard a voice. "You're late, Daniel." The words echoed through the crypt, their source impossible to identify, but they were clear, unmistakable, and they carried with them the weight of something ancient, something waiting for me. I stood frozen, every muscle in my body locked in place. The voice, the Hollow Man, he had been waiting for me. And now, there was no turning back. My heart thudded in my chest as I stood over the hole in the crypt's floor, my breath shallow and erratic. The voice, no, the whisper, had come from below, but there was no figure, no shadow, no movement to suggest any presence. Still, the words hung in the air like a curse. "You're late, Daniel." I tried to steady myself, to make sense of the situation, but the room felt smaller, the walls closer with each passing second. The symbols that lined the walls seemed to writhe, their meaning just beyond my grasp, as though they were written in a language I should understand, but didn't. The hole in the floor was too small, too perfect for a man to fit, yet I knew somehow that it was the answer, whatever twisted, dark answer this place held. I crouched beside it, my fingers brushing the edge of the stone, cold and smooth beneath my touch. The hole led deeper into the earth, a tunnel that stretched far beyond the crypt's decaying walls. I could feel the weight of something heavy pressing down from below, something that had been waiting, patient, for years. As I stared into the darkness, a flicker of memory tugged at the edges of my mind. Elias, the journal, his frantic handwriting, his desperation in every word. It all started to connect, slowly, painfully. The crypt, the hollow man, and now, me. I had followed the trail, pieced together the clues he had left behind. But what had I summoned? The hollow man, the creature, the entity, the curse, was real, and it was waiting. But why? Why had I been chosen? What part did my family play in all of this? And more importantly, what was it that I was about to awaken by crawling into that hole? A cold wind swept through the crypt, and for a brief moment I thought I saw something move in the dark, a shape, a figure, half hidden in the shadows. My pulse raced. I wasn't alone. Then, something strange happened. The floor beneath me began to rumble, as if it was coming alive. The stone surrounding the hole shifted, groaning under pressure. My hands shot back, my body stiff with fear. A low, guttural sound rumbled from below, almost like a growl, deep and ancient, like something long imprisoned. And then, as the rumbling ceased, the voice came again. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was louder, more distinct. And it was speaking to me, not in words, but in a feeling. "Come down, Daniel." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, my thoughts scattering in 1,000 directions. The crypt had become a tomb, its very air thick with anticipation. The hollow man was waiting. He had always been waiting for me, and whether I chose to step forward or not, I knew there was no escaping this moment. I leaned over the hole, my mind a blur. The smell of the earth below was overwhelming now, rotting, decaying, like the grave itself had opened its mouth and was inviting me inside. I reached down, and then, with a sudden sharp noise, the hole collapsed. The floor beneath me gave way, and before I could react, I was falling. I didn't even have time to scream. The moment the floor gave way, the ground beneath me crumbled, and I plummeted into the darkness below. The sudden rush of air, the sickening drop, and the cold, sharp sting of stones against my skin as I fell. Everything happened so quickly. My body twisted in midair as I fought to grasp something, anything, to stop my descent. But there was nothing, just an endless, suffocating blackness. My stomach lurched as the floor disappeared entirely, and I fell deeper into the crypt's abyss. I landed hard, a jolt of pain shooting up my spine as I hit the ground. The world spun, and I gasped for air, trying to push myself up, but the ground beneath me was slick with something, damp, cold, and unfamiliar. My fingers slipped across the surface, and I froze. A sharp, guttural sound came from the darkness, followed by a low scraping noise like something dragging across the floor toward me. My heart pounded in my chest as my instinct screamed for me to run, to get away. But where could I go? The walls, the floor, the entire space felt endless, like I was trapped inside some subterranean nightmare. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the haze in my vision. As my eyes adjusted, I saw the faint outline of the tunnel around me. The walls were smooth, polished, and coated in a dark, viscous substance that shimmered in the dim light. I had no idea where it came from, but it gave off an almost sickly glow. The air smelled worse now, like damp earth, yes, but also something else. Something chemical, burning at the back of my throat. It was almost like a mixture of rotten flesh and sulfur. The sound of dragging grew louder. I pushed myself up, my legs unsteady, my head spinning. I stumbled forward, desperate to make sense of the situation. What was this place? Why had I been brought here? Suddenly, I saw a light flicker in the distance. It was faint, just a pinprick in the distance, but it was enough to anchor me, enough to draw me forward. My feet shuffled across the ground as I moved toward it, my hands outstretched, desperate to find something solid. The dragging sound seemed to follow me, growing louder and louder with each step. My chest tightened as I realized the sound wasn't coming from behind me. It was moving alongside me as though something was in the tunnel with me. Then there it was. A door. A massive wooden door, aged and warped, but still standing tall in the middle of the tunnel. The light I had seen was coming from behind it, a pale, flickering glow that seemed unnatural, eerie. I reached for the door handle, my hand trembling. As I touched it, the cold metal burned against my palm, sending a shock through my entire body. A voice whispered, just barely audible, through the cracks in the door. "You're late, Daniel." The same voice. The same words from before. Only now there was a strange resonance to it, an unnatural hum that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I wanted to turn back, to leave, but the pull was too strong. I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. The light from behind, it spilled out, bathing the room in a sickly yellow glow. The sight that met me on the other side wasn't anything like I had imagined. The room was vast, cavernous, but there were no walls, no floor beneath my feet. Just an endless expanse of shifting shadows, like the room itself was breathing, expanding, contracting with each pulse. In the center of the room, the hollow man stood, his form a blur of darkness and light. His face was a nightmare, his eyes hollow pits of blackness, his mouth stretched into a grin that was too wide, too unnatural. He tilted his head as I entered, his grin widening even further. "You've come," he said, his voice smooth like velvet, but edged with something darker, something that tasted of ancient death. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words died in my throat. It wasn't fear that kept me silent. It was something else, something deeper, a gnawing, cold emptiness that seemed to seep into my very bones. He moved closer, and the ground beneath me shifted. I staggered back, almost falling into the darkness below, but something caught me. I couldn't tell if it was the air or something unseen, something moving in the shadows. But the hollow man was still watching me, his black eyes unblinking, his mouth twisting with a grotesque satisfaction. "I've been waiting for you, Daniel," he whispered. "We all have, and for the first time I felt the terrible weight of what had been waiting beneath the earth, waiting for me." The hollow man was not just a name, not just a creature. He was something far worse, something older than time itself. And now it seemed I was part of whatever twisted fate he had prepared. The door behind me slammed shut. I had never been afraid of things like this. The urban legends, the rumors, the whispers of haunted houses and long-dead families. None of it had ever fazed me. In fact, I kind of thrived on it. It was my thing, you know? I loved the thrill. The adrenaline. There was something about fear that made me feel more alive, more in control. It was why I carried my GoPro everywhere, why I'd make a documentary out of just about anything. Nothing scared me. Nothing, that is, until we stepped into the Blackthorn estate. I didn't tell the others about the feeling that crept up my spine the moment we got close to the house. But it was there. Something in the air had shifted as soon as the dilapidated gates came into view, their rusted iron twisted into strange shapes like the fingers of some long-forgotten monster. The house stood on the edge of Ravenswood Hollow, like a beast that had been abandoned, its windows shattered like missing teeth, its front door crooked on rusted hinges. The Blackthorn estate wasn't just a house. It was a graveyard wrapped in stone, a place where something had died, and something had been born in its place. "We're doing this, right?" I asked, my voice confident but my hands a little shaky, as I adjusted the GoPro on my chest. I shot a look over at Jenna, my girlfriend, who was already rolling her eyes. She hated these kinds of things, especially when I dragged her into it. But she was here because she didn't trust me alone with Mia, and if I was being honest, I didn't blame her. I don't know why I'm still here, Jenna muttered, but her tone was light enough to suggest she was mostly kidding. Mostly. Mia, our skeptic, was already scanning the house with her EMF detector, the device barely registering anything. "This is stupid," she said. "None of this is real. It's all just superstition and bad wiring." "Yeah, sure," I said, grinning, and looking at her through the lens of my camera. "Tell that to the locals. We were in Ravenswood because we wanted to make a name for ourselves, to get some real footage for the channel I was trying to start. The town was practically a ghost, town itself, with the mine having shut down decades ago. Ravenswood had become little more than a memory in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, but it had one thing going for it: the Blackthorn estate, the mansion that had been abandoned for nearly a century, its original family dead under mysterious circumstances. Rumor had it that the family had fed something in that house. No one knew exactly what that meant, but it was the kind of thing you could build a reputation on. We'd stopped at Harker's gas station earlier that day to fill up, and I'll admit, the old man's warnings still lingered in my head. He spat tobacco in front of the station, his face as wrinkled as the skin of an apple left in the sun too long. "The house don't let folks leave the same way they came in," he had said, his voice a gravelly whisper. He had looked at me like he was seeing through me, like he knew what was going to happen. But I had brushed it off. Old men like Harker had a tendency to spin yarns about things they didn't understand. The truth was, we were already too deep into it. The adventure was already set in motion, and I wasn't going to back down now. The path up to the house was overgrown with thick weeds, their tangles pushing against my legs as we made our way toward the front door. The sound of crunching leaves underfoot was the only noise until Mia spoke again, her voice cutting through the silence. "Are we seriously going in there? Like, actually?" She shot a glance back at me, her expression a mix of disbelief and irritation. "Liam, we could be doing literally anything else right now." I smiled, giving her a playful nudge. "It's for the channel, Mia. Think of the views." She rolled her eyes again, but she kept walking. The house loomed over us as we reached the porch, the air thick with the smell of wet rot and something coppery like blood. It was stronger here, almost choking, and I could see the black mold, creeping along the edges of the walls, pulsing in the dim light. Jenna, already on edge, shifted uncomfortably, and I could see her grip tightening on the flashlight in her hand. The beam cut through the darkness, but even it seemed to falter, as if the house itself didn't want to be seen. Without another word, I pushed open the crooked door, and we stepped inside. The atmosphere in the house was almost oppressive. The air was heavy with the smell of decay, and the floorboards groaned under our weight. Dust hung in the air like thick fog, catching in the dim light of our flashlights. I tried to brush off the unease that was slowly creeping up on me. This was just an abandoned house, it was just an adventure. But when the door slammed shut behind us, something in my gut twisted. We were in, and there was no turning back. The floor beneath our feet creaked as we moved deeper into the house. Jenna's flashlight flickered and went out, the beam cutting off with a sudden unexpected silence. "Great," she muttered. "That's just perfect." I pulled out my own flashlight, shaking it to see if I could get it to work again, but Mia's EMF detector started to beep, a sharp, frantic sound that seemed to fill the air around us. This isn't normal," she said, holding the device out. The readings were spiking. "I mean, this is off the charts, what the hell?" I glanced at the device, my stomach flipping. Something was wrong. Something more than just the old wiring. I could feel it. And the worst part? I was starting to think old man Harker's warnings might have been more than just superstition, but it was too late to back out now. We were already here, and whatever was waiting in the shadows of Blackthorn Estate was waiting for us too. The silence inside the Blackthorn Estate was thick, unnerving, suffocating. Every step we took seemed to echo bouncing off the walls, and yet it didn't feel like the house was empty. It felt like it was watching us, listening to us. The air was heavy with dust, and each breath I took seemed to catch in my throat. The coppery smell, rust maybe, or something older, was impossible to ignore. I could feel it on the back of my tongue, like I was inhaling something poisonous. Jenna cursed softly under her breath as she clicked her flashlight on and off, trying to get it to work again. "This is bullshit," she muttered, flicking the flashlight as if it were a malfunctioning piece of junk. But it was dead. No bright beam, no flicker. Just darkness. "Hold on." I reached into my backpack for another flashlight and handed it to her. She took it with a grunt of thanks but didn't seem thrilled about it. Mia was fiddling with her EMF detector. The device was now making a soft, incessant beep. Not just a few blips like a malfunction. No, this was constant. Louder with every step we took. The lights flickered a few times as though the house itself was trying to keep us in the dark. "Is that thing supposed to do that?" Des asked, his voice sounding distant as though he was already stoned, his eyes glassy and distant. He had his phone out, scrolling through Reddit as usual, only occasionally glancing up at us like he wasn't really present in the moment. I had to admire his ability to remain unfazed by the eerie situation. I was starting to lose that cool. Not really," Mia replied, a slight tremor in her voice. "It's showing levels way past what's normal for any electromagnetic field. And honestly, I don't know why it's spiking like this. It's almost like we're standing in front of a microwave or an electrical storm." I couldn't help but laugh nervously. "Great, we're in a haunted microwave. That's exactly what I wanted for the weekend." Jenna wasn't amused. Her eyes were darting around the room, shifting between the shadowy corners, trying to pierce the darkness with her flashlight. But no matter how hard she tried, the light didn't seem to cut through the gloom. The beam quivered like it didn't belong here, like the house was pushing it back. We moved deeper into the house. Each room we passed looked more dilapidated than the last, filled with broken furniture, peeling wallpaper, and the smell of mold that seemed to seep from the very walls. The floorboards creaked under our weight, groaning with every step we took. The house felt like it was alive, its every creak and groan warning us to turn back. But none of us said anything. There was no turning back now. "Over here," Mia said. Her voice hushed. She pointed toward a doorway at the end of the hall. It led to a small room, the light from our flashlights cutting through the dust in the air. At first I thought it was just another room, another faded, forgotten part of the house. But as I stepped closer, I saw it. A child's bedroom. The bed was tiny, its sheets still neatly made, as though someone had just tucked them in. It was disturbing, the way everything seemed frozen in time. The faded pink wallpaper, the porcelain, dolls on the dresser. But it was the music box on the dresser that caught my attention. It was sitting there unmoving, a delicate little thing, its brass gears and wind-up key glinting under the flashlight's beam. The lid was closed, the painted ballerina locked in place. The soft, eerie tune that played when it was wound had long stopped. But as I stepped closer, the box began to play. At first it was faint, a soft, tinny melody that I recognized from every childhood horror story I'd ever heard. "It's probably just the wind or something," I said, trying to cover the discomfort creeping up my spine. But the music didn't stop. I watched in silence as it continued, the tune twisting in, the heavy silence of the room, each note ringing louder and louder until it seemed to fill the entire room. And then it stopped abruptly, mid-song. Jenna stepped forward, looking at the music box like it was some sort of time bomb. That's weird," she said. "Isn't that kind of creepy? Like, who would leave something like that behind?" Mia was looking at the music box, too, but her gaze was more intense, her face hard with concentration. "It doesn't make sense," she muttered. "No draft, no reason it should start up like that. The air's completely still." Des laughed uneasily. "Yeah, the ghosts are trying to give us a concert. Real classy." I didn't feel like laughing anymore. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. There was a presence here, something more than just the stories. Something was waiting for us. We decided to move on, but the moment we turned to leave the room, I felt it. A sudden, sharp shift in the air. A coldness that wasn't there before. It wasn't just the temperature. It was something else. Something unnatural. I glanced at the others, but before I could say anything, Mia's EMF detector spiked again. This time, the sound was different, more aggressive, almost like static. Then the air went still again. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. We weren't alone in this house, and we never had been. Before I could voice my concern, Jenna's flashlight flickered again, casting strange shadows across the walls. I could hear the faintest scratching sound. At first, I thought it was just my nerves, but then I heard it again, closer now. The sound was coming from the other side of the hallway. It wasn't wind. It wasn't the house settling. Something was moving. Something was alive in this house, and it was getting closer. The scratching noise stopped suddenly. One moment it was there, scraping, dragging, like fingernails running across stone, and the next, it was just gone. I stood still, my heart hammering in my chest, my breath coming in shallow bursts as I waited for the sound to resume. I didn't dare move at first, not knowing if it was some animal, some critter that had taken residence in the walls of this dying house. But it felt wrong. The air felt thicker somehow, like something unseen was moving just beyond the reach of the light. "We need to get out of here," Jenna whispered, her voice low but tense, the flashlight trembling in her hand as she scanned the darkness. I wanted to agree. I wanted to take her by the arm and lead us out of the house before things got any worse. But something inside me, something darker, held me in place. The house was pulling at me, its very presence urging me to stay. I'd felt it from the moment I stepped over the threshold, like the walls were alive, feeding off my hesitation, feeding off my curiosity. "We're not leaving yet," I said, trying to sound confident. But the words felt hollow. "We came for this, remember?" Mia glanced at me, a frown tugging at her lips. "You seriously want to keep going after that? What was that sound? Who else is in here with us?" "Probably just a rat or something," I said, trying to brush it off. But I could hear the uncertainty in my own voice. Des, still half dazed, looked up from his phone. "If it's a rat, it's the biggest one I've ever heard," he muttered. Then he shrugged, as though none of this fazed him at all. "But, yeah, whatever, we're here now. We might as well see what else is going on." I tried to ignore the way his calmness made me feel more uneasy, more exposed. There was something wrong with the house, something beyond what we could see. It wasn't just the noise, it was the air, the pressure, the weight pressing down on us, the feeling of eyes following our every move. "Let's just get through this. Room?" I said, gesturing toward the hallway. "We can check out the rest of the house, get some footage. I'll bet we'll find something cool for the channel." Jenna gave me a look, clearly unconvinced, but she nodded and stepped forward. Anyway, her footsteps echoing too loudly in the hallway. Mia's EMF detector was still going haywire, but now it was a constant hum, like a low, vibrating energy that I could feel in my chest. The sound was becoming almost unbearable. We pushed forward, making our way deeper into the house. The walls were closing in around us, and the air was so thick with the smell of rot that it made me want to gag. It was worse than any of us had expected, worse than the stories we had heard. This wasn't just an abandoned house. This was something alive. We stopped at what seemed to be the entrance to a small room. The door, barely hanging on its hinges, led to what appeared to be a storage area or a closet. But when we stepped through, the room wasn't what it seemed. It was like a hallway, narrow and winding, its walls lined with faded wallpaper. And then, at the end of the hall, we saw it. Another door. It wasn't like the others. It looked too pristine, as though it had been untouched by time. "Should we?" Jenna asked, voice trembling. The question wasn't for me. It was for herself. "Yeah, let's see what's behind it," I said, already stepping forward, my hand on the doorknob before anyone could say anything. The door creaked open with an unnatural ease, revealing a space I wasn't expecting. A chapel. The room was dim, lit by a single flickering candle at the altar. The pews were ancient, made of rotting wood, their surfaces covered in dust. But it wasn't the pews that caught my attention. It was the dolls. Life-sized dolls, dressed in tattered, outdated clothing, their faces frozen in stitched expressions of pain, permanent grotesque screams. Their glassy eyes stared blankly at us, their heads slightly turned toward the altar, as though they were waiting. Waiting for something. "Oh God," Mia whispered. "What the hell is this?" I felt my stomach twist at the sight. This wasn't just creepy. This was wrong. The dolls were too lifelike, too meticulously arranged, too purposeful. It was as if someone had placed them here with intent, like they were part of a ritual. I heard Jenna step behind me, her breath shallow. "I don't like this, Liam. I really don't like this." "Let's just get the footage and go," I said, though I felt every word was a lie. I wasn't sure I wanted to be here anymore. Des was already pulling his phone out, holding it up, to get the best shot. "I gotta say, this place is pretty damn weird. What are these, like cult dolls or something?" I shook my head, but my gaze lingered on the dolls. There were dozens of them, all different sizes and ages. They looked as though they had been positioned intentionally, carefully. Then my eyes landed on the altar. The book. It was a leather-bound tome, sitting open in the center. The pages were yellowed with age, and the words, scrawled across them, looked almost ancient. But the worst part was the list of names. Hundreds of them. Names written in ink that had faded over time, but still legible. "What is this?" Mia murmured, leaning in for a closer look. I didn't answer. My eyes were already locked on the last entry in the book. It was blank, but it had 4 lines, empty spaces that beckoned us to fill them in. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest as I read the words written beside the blank lines. "Read aloud. Awaken the ones who wait." Before I could react, Des leaned over and, with a curious grin, read the words out loud. The house groaned. The dolls moved. Their heads turned, slowly, one by one, as if following the sound of Des's voice. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just stared at the dolls, feeling the weight of their unblinking gaze. The door behind us slammed shut. The slam of the door behind us was so sudden, so violent, that it felt like the entire house had taken a breath and exhaled all at once. My heart skipped a beat. The air in the room thickened, and I could feel it pressing against me, wrapping itself around my chest until I could barely breathe. I turned to look at the door, my eyes wide with panic, but the handle wouldn't budge. Jenna was the first to react. She rushed toward the door, throwing her shoulder into it, but it didn't give. The wood groaned as though it were resisting her touch. Her breath was quick, frantic. "What the hell, Liam? Let's get out of here." I barely heard her. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the dolls. They were moving. It wasn't just their heads that had turned. They were shifting, twitching, as if something invisible was guiding them. I felt a sickening chill run through me, a coldness that sank into my bones. My body screamed at me to leave, to run, but my feet felt frozen to the floor. It was like the house had its hooks in me, keeping me here. I couldn't look away. "Liam, come on," Jenna yelled. Her voice strained as she continued to shove at the door. Mia's EMF detector, which had been almost silent up until this point, was now emitting a constant high-pitched whine. The air felt electric, charged, and the noise from the device was grating on my nerves. Mia was the next to speak. "This isn't just some weird setup. This is real. This house is alive." Her voice was steady, but I could see the way her hands were trembling as she gripped the EMF detector. "We need to get out. Now." But I couldn't move. My mind was clouded, every instinct screaming to run, but my body refused to obey. My eyes were locked on the dolls, the way their eyes, those black, lifeless eyes, seemed to follow every movement, every breath we took. They were waiting for something, for someone. I felt the air shift again. There was a sound, a scraping, low and guttural, from the far side of the room. I turned toward it, my neck stiff as I strained to see what it was. For a moment I thought, it was just my imagination, but then it happened again, louder this time. The scraping was unmistakable, like something dragging across the floor. Something heavy. The dolls' heads tilted toward the sound, their movements slow and deliberate, as if they were trying to communicate with whatever was making the noise. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing inward, the ceiling lower, closer, until I felt like I was suffocating in the dark, in the cold. "Liam!" Jenna's voice cut through the rising panic, and I snapped my head back to her. She had stopped trying to force open the door and was now looking around the room, her face pale. "What the hell is happening?" I don't know," I stammered. "I don't know what's going on." But I knew. Deep down I knew. The house was responding to what Des had read aloud. The ritual, the book, the 4 lines. It had triggered something. Awaken the ones who wait. That's what it said. And now whatever waited in the shadows of this house was stirring. I could feel it now, moving through the air. A dark presence that wrapped itself around us. It was ancient, old beyond anything I could comprehend. And it was angry. Then, without warning, the floor beneath us gave a violent shudder, like a low growl rumbling from deep within the earth. The walls creaked, the windows rattled in their frames. The house seemed to be coming alive, and we were trapped in its belly. A sound cut through the air, this time not from the dolls, but from behind us. Footsteps, dragging footsteps, slow and deliberate. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and twist, pooling into something darker, something solid. A figure emerged from the blackness. Its shape was indistinct at first, a shifting mass, but then, slowly, I began to make out details, a figure, tall, impossibly tall, with no discernible face. Just a hollow, empty void where eyes should have been, and a mouth stretched impossibly wide, jagged, split from ear to ear. The thing's skin was like old, cracked leather, gray and decaying, barely clinging to whatever shape it had once been. It was dragging itself toward us, its limbs unnaturally long and bent, its movements jerky like it wasn't used to walking. The stench that filled the room was unbearable. Rotting flesh, blood, something else sickening. My stomach churned, and my legs finally gave out beneath me. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air, but the thing didn't stop. It kept coming, its head tilting as if it was studying us, examining us, savoring the terror in our eyes. Jenna screamed. The sound ripped through the house, but it only seemed to excite the thing, pushing it forward faster. I crawled backward, my hands scraping against the cold, filthy floor as I tried to find my footing. But the figure was too close now. It was upon us, its mouth opening wide in that grotesque smile, and I could hear it. A low, rasping laugh that didn't come from its throat. It was inside the walls, inside the house itself, like the house was laughing along with it. "Run!" I yelled, my voice hoarse with fear. But the door was still closed, the walls still pressing in on us. There was nowhere to go. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw it. A hatch. It was small, barely noticeable in the corner of the room, partially hidden by a rug. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing Jenna's arm and pulling her toward it. "Down there," I gasped, but she was frozen in place, staring at the thing that had crawled into the room. "Liam, we have to go now," I screamed, dragging her toward the hatch. Mia and Des were already behind us, moving quickly, pushing the heavy rug aside to expose the trap door. I don't know how we did it, but we managed to pry it open. We didn't look back. We couldn't. Not while that thing was in the room with us. We tumbled into the darkness below, the hatch slamming shut behind us. The world was silent for a moment, but that silence didn't last long. The house was still watching. We tumbled into the blackness of the basement, our limbs entangled as we scrambled to get a grip on the dirt-slick floor. My breath came in jagged gasps, my chest tightening with each desperate inhale. I couldn't hear the thing, the faceless monstrosity above us anymore, but I knew it was still there, still waiting. It had to be. We had only barely escaped, and now we were trapped in some other part of the house, cut off from the light, cut off from hope. I pushed myself up, my hands shaking as I grabbed hold of the edges of the trapdoor. It was heavy, impossibly heavy, but we managed to close it behind us with a final resounding thud. The air was thick down here, colder than it had any right to be. And the smell, foul and rotten, as though the house itself had exhaled death into this space. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound our rapid breathing, the echo of our heartbeats pounding in our ears. Jenna was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper, but there was a panic underlying her words. Is it gone? What the hell just happened? Mia was hunched over, still clutching the EMF detector, but now the screen was dark, completely void of any life. She didn't answer Jenna's question immediately. She just looked at the device as though it might somehow explain everything that was happening. But there was nothing. It was just dead, like everything else in this house. It's not gone, I said, my voice hoarse and low. Whatever that was, it's still here. It's part of this house. It's always been part of this house. We all knew it was true. I could feel it in my bones. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive. In some way, something ancient and hungry that had been feeding on whoever stepped into it. And somehow, we had awakened it. Des was silent. Too silent. I glanced over at him and saw that he had put his phone down. His usual relaxed, indifferent demeanor had disappeared. His eyes were wide, glassy, and for the first time I could tell he was afraid. We need to get out, he said, his voice thin, as if saying the words made him doubt their possibility. There's got to be a way out, we just need to find it. Yeah, we'll find it, I said, more to myself than anyone else. We'll get out of here, but we need to keep moving. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my jeans and trying to ignore the heavy sense of dread settling in my stomach. We moved forward cautiously, our footsteps barely audible in the oppressive silence. The air grew colder the deeper we went, the walls of the basement stretching endlessly into the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was shifting around us, watching us, listening for any sign of weakness. And I realized suddenly that there was one thing we hadn't thought about. We weren't just trapped in this house. We were part of it now. The thought made me dizzy. We had entered with our own free will, driven by the desire to prove something, to uncover some twisted story, to make something out of the madness. And now it seemed the house had decided that it wasn't going to let us go, not without paying its price. We stumbled through the basement, searching for an exit, but the deeper we went, the more disorienting it became. The walls twisted, the passageways seemed to loop back on themselves, and no matter how much we walked, there was no end in sight. Every step felt heavier, as though the house itself was pulling us back, forcing us deeper into its grasp. Liam, Mia said, her voice tight with fear. She pointed toward something in the distance. A faint light, flickering, coming from a corner of the basement. It was too dim to be a flashlight or lantern. It seemed like something else. We moved toward it, a collective instinct urging us forward. As we drew closer, the light grew brighter until we reached the source. A mirror. A tall, ornate mirror standing against the far wall, its surface dusty and cracked. But the light was coming from within it. A dull, ghostly glow. I couldn't stop myself. I had to look. There was something magnetic about it, some force pulling my eyes toward the reflection. At first I didn't see anything. Just my own face, pale, exhausted, with terror in my eyes. But then the reflection shifted. The faces of my friends started to distort. Their features twisted, elongated, and suddenly their expressions turned into something grotesque, like something was unraveling their humanity. I blinked, and for a brief moment I saw them, the figures, the faceless man and the little girl with the music box. They were in the reflection, standing right behind us. Spun around, but there was nothing there. The basement was empty, still as death. They're in the mirror, I whispered, my voice shaking. They're in the house with us. We can't escape them. The others turned to me, their faces pale, but none of them spoke. They didn't have to. We all knew what was happening now. The house wasn't just trying to trap us, it was trying to consume us. Suddenly, a voice, low and guttural, rumbled through the room. You should not have come. The walls trembled. The sound was inside my head, a voice that didn't belong to anything human, and yet it felt like it was speaking directly to us. The mirror began to pulse, the faces in it contorting more violently, more alive. We are the house. The light flickered, and then the ground began to tremble. A deep, throbbing pulse reverberated through the air. I couldn't stand. I collapsed to the ground, my hands pressed to my ears, but the voice kept coming. It was everywhere. You belong to us now. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the reflection of those things. The faceless man, the little girl, and the dolls crawling out from the mirror. And then, nothing. The next morning, the town of Ravenswood was quiet. The sun rose sluggishly over the horizon, casting its muted light over the Blackthorn estate. The house stood, as it always had, abandoned and forgotten. But the truth was, it wasn't empty. Inside, the dust lay thick on the floors, the windows still cracked. But in the attic, in the rooms where the dolls used to sit, there were new figures. The mirrors had been shattered, but their reflections remained. 4 new faces, screaming, hollow-eyed faces, hung on the walls. In Jenna's bedroom, the music box played, and in the living room, a GoPro camera sat on a shelf, its lens cracked but still recording. A voice echoed faintly in the stillness. We are the house. And somewhere, deep in the basement, the trap door remained open. I lit my 3rd cigarette of the hour with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The wind outside Blackwood Station cut through my coat like it had teeth, sharp and bitter. The station looked like it hadn't been touched since Nixon was in office. Graffiti scrawled. Walls, ticket machines blinking error, and a vending machine humming some kind of death rattle in the corner. If there was a god of forgotten places, this was its altar. I checked the time. 11:47 p.m. The 11:55 to Redmire was late. Not unusual, not here, but tonight felt different. Heavier. I'd just come from interviewing a reclusive horror writer named Alton Ridgway. He agreed to the meeting under 2 conditions. No photos, and I had to meet him in person at his crumbling Victorian house out near Harrow's Hollow. I thought he was eccentric, maybe even full of it. But halfway through the interview, he stopped mid-sentence. Just stopped. He was talking about the feeling of being watched, how the best horror wasn't in the blood but in the waiting, and then he went still. I called his name, tapped his shoulder. He was dead. Just like that. Heart attack, maybe. Stroke. But his eyes were open, and they were locked on me. I left before the paramedics got there. I know how that looks, but I didn't want to answer questions I didn't have answers for. I needed to get out of that town. Fast. So here I was, waiting for a train I wasn't even sure would come. The platform was empty except for one other person. He sat on the far bench, legs crossed, wearing a gray suit that belonged to a different century, 1940s, maybe earlier. He had this fedora tilted just right and polished shoes that didn't belong in a place with this much grime. His face was pale, stretched too tight over high cheekbones, and when he smiled, it was too wide, too rehearsed. "You missed your train?" he asked without looking at me. I didn't answer right away. I was still sizing him up, trying to figure out if he was dangerous or just another eccentric who liked loitering in dead places. He turned his head. "You've got the look," he said. "What look's that?" "The kind of man who's seen something he shouldn't have. Like you've been told a secret too big to carry." I snorted and took another drag. "I'm a journalist, that's half the job description." He chuckled, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It came out low and double-layered, like 2 voices, stacked on top of each other. "You want to hear a story while we wait?" he asked. "Sure," I said, mostly to fill the silence. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "This station," he said, "used to be part of the main line, before it was shut down in the 40s. You know why?" I shook my head. "Because a train vanished, the entire thing. Locomotive, cars, passengers, poof, right off the map. The 11:55 to Redmire, same one you're waiting on. He let the words sit between us like they were some kind of challenge. I cracked a smile, but my fingers were ice around the cigarette. Urban legend. He tilted his head. Maybe, but funny thing is, the exact time it vanished was 11:55. On the dot, October 13th, 1942. I looked at the date on my phone. October 13th. He smiled again. Midnight's coming, Mr. Cross. You ready for the ride? I didn't ask how he knew my name. I was too busy wondering why. When I checked his reflection in the dirty glass of the ticket booth, I couldn't see him at all. I sat there for a while, telling myself the guy was just some burnout actor running a long con for kicks. Maybe a local nut who hung around the station for lack of anything better to do. But something about the way he spoke, low and precise, like he was reciting a script carved into his bones, made my skin crawl. The man hadn't moved since our last exchange. He sat like a statue, elbows still on his knees, eyes trained on me. When I glanced down at his shoes again, I realized they weren't just clean. They were spotless. Not a speck of dust, not even a scuff on the leather, like he'd just stepped out of a department store display. In this place, that was damn near impossible. All right, I said, more to shake off the tension than anything else. Let's hear the rest of the story. His grin flickered, like a neon sign trying to hold voltage. Daniel Shaw, he said. Salesman. Good husband. Lousy drinker. The kind of guy who always got close to making things right, then slipped. Wife was sick. Cancer, they think. Hospital called one night. Said she might not make it till morning. He missed the last bus and ran here, hoping the 11:55 would take him to Redmire in time. He paused. It showed up. I leaned forward despite myself. But? The man's lips barely moved. The conductor had no face. Daniel got on anyway. There was something about the way he said it. Like it wasn't part of a tale, but a statement of fact. What happened? They found him the next morning, sitting right there. He pointed to the bench I was on, hands folded, eyes wide open. His heart was gone. I laughed under my breath. Heart attack, I guess. No. Gone. He leaned in just slightly, enough for me to catch the faint scent of mothballs and burnt matches. Like it was never there, but his pocket watch. He tapped his chest over where a vest would have been. Still ticking. I rubbed my arms. The station felt colder all of a sudden. You believe in ghosts, Mr. Cross? Only when the lights go out. He nodded slowly, as if that was the correct answer. They say the train comes back sometimes, just once a year. Just long enough to pick up another passenger. I checked the wall clock again. 11:53. Yeah? And who's next? I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. That's when he reached into his coat and pulled out something small and rectangular. A train. Ticket, he handed it to me. It was old, yellowed, brittle around the edges. My name was printed across the top. Ethan Cross, and the date? October 13th, 1942. Where did you get this? He didn't answer, just sat back with that same waxy grin. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I snatched it out like a lifeline, screen black. Wouldn't turn on. Dead. Even though I'd charged it before I left Ridgway's house. The fluorescence above us flickered, then dimmed. The air in the station changed. Heavier. Thicker. I stood. Up. Look, man, I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling. Do you hear that? He asked, tilting his head. I stopped. Far off, so faint I thought I was imagining it, came the low rumble of a train. A horn, long and slow, like something dying. He stood too. Midnight's almost here, Ethan. Better decide if you're boarding. My mouth was dry. I stared down at the ticket in my hand, and it was warm. I didn't move. The ticket in my hand felt like it had a pulse. Not warm like a jacket fresh out of the dryer. Warm like it was alive. Breathing. Waiting. Outside, the tracks groaned. That same distant horn, long and sad, echoed through the station, rattling the broken panes in the high windows. I looked at the man again. Grayson. if that was even his real name. He stood by the bench now, perfectly still, like he was part of the scenery. His eyes weren't on me anymore. They were fixed on the tunnel entrance at the far end of the platform, and then I heard it, the sound of wheels on tracks. Metal shrieking against metal. Too slow, too heavy, like something dragging itself out of a grave. The tunnel mouth was just black, no headlights, no glow, no sign of a locomotive, but it was coming. Last chance, Grayson said, turning back toward me. His voice was quieter now. Less confident, less showman, more something else. Like even he wasn't sure what happened next. I stepped back. I'm not getting on that thing. He nodded slowly. You already did. The lights above us went out. All of them. Complete blackout. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The kind of darkness that smothers, that crawls into your mouth and nose and ears. I reached out blindly, almost dropped the damn ticket. Then, headlights, twin orbs of light flared from the tunnel, cutting through the gloom like searchlights. Not white, but a sickly, sepia yellow, like the color of old teeth. The engine groaned as it pulled in, rusted steel, smoke chugging out of vents along the roof like factory exhaust. No logos, no numbers, just black paint, peeling and streaked, with something darker. The train doors hissed open. Nobody stepped out. No conductor, no passengers, just rows of black windows staring back like empty sockets. I turned to Grayson to say something, anything, but he was gone. Just gone. Only the echo of his voice lingered. Everyone boards eventually. I backed away from the train, stumbling over a cracked tile. My heart thudded hard enough to shake my ribs. The air stank of burning oil and something else. Metallic, familiar, sharp, blood. I reached for my phone, again out of habit. Still dead. A low moan came from one of the open car doors. Not mechanical. Human. I swear to God, it sounded like someone saying my name. I turned and bolted, past the empty ticket booth. Through the lobby, boots pounding against the tile like gunshots. I shoved through the main doors and out into the parking lot, gasping for breath. No cars, no wind, no sound except the train, sitting back there on the tracks, still waiting. I ran, until my lungs burned and the lights of the town came back into view, what little was left of Harrow's Hollow. When I finally collapsed on a park bench 3 blocks away, I tore the ticket in half and threw it. It didn't tear, just bent like plastic and snapped back into place, completely unharmed. I stared at it, chest heaving. The date printed across. The top hadn't changed, but the destination had. Redmire. One way I didn't sleep that night. I chain-smoked 3 cigarettes I swore I'd quit. Sat by the window of my one-room rental on Bayfield Street, just watching the shadows creep across the walls. I kept checking the hallway mirror every few minutes. Not for vanity, for movement, for something off. I didn't see it, but I felt it. The weight of eyes that weren't there, that shouldn't be there. Around 5:12 a.m., just as the sky began bleeding that weird pre-dawn purple, I remembered the voice on the recorder, the one I didn't record. The train comes for everyone, Ethan, even you. That wasn't from my interview with Harrow. That voice was younger, colder, clearer, and it knew my name. I had to go back through the audio, figure out what the hell happened at that interview. So I popped in fresh batteries, connected the recorder to my laptop and hit play. At first it was what I remembered. Harrow looking like death on legs in his faded corduroy robe, answering my softball questions with bitter sarcasm. The old bastard smoked unfiltered Camels and sipped from a chipped mug of straight bourbon at 10 a.m. I was mostly there for a puff piece. Man of mystery, recluse novelist, that kind of thing. You ever regret writing it? I'd asked. He'd looked at me over his glasses and said, regrets for people who die honest. Whatever that meant. But around the 28-minute mark, the recording changed. There was a crackle, a weird distortion, like the mic had brushed against something warm and wet. Then silence. Then Harrow whispered, "Don't wait too long. The 11:55 doesn't wait for doubters." I leaned in. That line had never been said in person, I was sure of it. The timestamp on the file glitched, blinking. And then came the second voice, a voice I hadn't heard during the interview. Young, calm, unshakably confident. The passengers board whether they understand or not. They always do. Then the recorder clicked off by itself. No buttons pressed. Just dead air. I yanked the cord from my laptop and sat back, cold sweat soaking through my t-shirt. Something about that voice reminded me of Grayson Vale, but younger. More alive. Maybe even excited. My phone buzzed. No number. Just, "You're next." I didn't scream, I didn't cry, but I did something worse. I started rationalizing. Could be a prank, some glitch, some psycho who hacked me through Wi-Fi. Maybe someone at the station's watching security footage and messing with me. Yeah, right. Like that station had functioning cameras. I got up to splash cold water on my face. When I looked into the mirror, my reflection wasn't doing the same. It just stared at me, unblinking, grinning. Not big, not cartoonish, just wrong. Like it knew something I didn't, and then it spoke. No sound, just the mouth moving. I read the words off my own lips. "Your seat's been reserved." I backed away so hard I knocked over the towel rack. When I looked again, it was just me. Shaking, pale, terrified. But me. I didn't go back to sleep. Didn't eat. Didn't shower. Just sat by the window and waited. Because tonight the 11:55 was coming again. And I had a choice to make. I didn't leave my apartment that day. Didn't answer my phone. Didn't return emails from my editor who probably thought I was hungover or dead in a ditch somewhere. Neither was far from the truth. The world outside my window looked wrong. Too still. Too clean. Like the air had been sterilized and replaced with a copy of itself. All day my eyes kept drifting to the corner of my living room, where I'd tossed my coat over a chair the night before. But every time I looked, I swore there was something underneath it. Shape, a silhouette too tall to be mine, just barely there, as if it wanted me to see it. When the clock hit 11:12 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the recorder, a pack of smokes, and left. Blackwood Station was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that feels thick, like the air's pressing in around your ears. The fluorescent lights buzzed in rhythm now, almost like a heartbeat. That metallic scent, the old blood smell, was stronger tonight. I checked the departure board. 55 to Red Mire, on time, no glitching, no delay. Just that one line, blood red and unwavering. Grayson Vale was already on the same bench. Same 1940s suit, same watch chain glinting in the overhead lights. Only this time he looked younger, like 10 years had been shaved off his face. "You're early," he said, smiling. "Most wait until it's too late." I didn't sit. I lit a cigarette and stayed on my feet close to the exit. "What the hell is this? Some kind of trick? A ghost story gone viral?" Grayson laughed. "Ghosts are echoes, Ethan. You're not hearing echoes. You're hearing invitations." He reached into his coat and handed me something. A train ticket. Dated November 2nd, 1942. My name was printed at the top, Ethan Cross. Below it, Car 3, Seat 12D. I stared at the paper, then back at him. "That's not possible." "You think time only runs forward?" he asked. "You poor bastard. You still think this station's on your map. You've already crossed the boundary, Ethan. The second you sat here the first night." The lights dimmed. The digital clock flipped to 11:55. The horn screamed. Not mechanical. Not from this century. It was like something alive was announcing itself. A wail that made my spine seize up. The train slid into the station. It looked rusted and ancient, with blacked-out windows and iron wheels that shouldn't have worked on modern tracks. There were no markings, no logos, no graffiti. The doors opened with a hiss like hot breath, and inside, just darkness. Grayson stood. Last chance. It only comes for those who hear it. He stepped inside. I couldn't, but something else stepped out. It wore my face. Not exactly, but close enough to twist my gut. It was me, but not tired, not broken, smiling. I stumbled backward. Next time, Grayson's voice echoed from inside the train. You won't run. The doors slammed shut. The train pulled away. No sound of an engine, just silence. And when it disappeared into the tunnel at the far end of the platform, I was alone. No Grayson, no doppelganger, just me. I staggered home in the dark. Didn't remember unlocking the door, didn't remember walking up the stairs. I sat in front of the mirror. My reflection stared back. Still me, for now. But behind the glass, just for a second, I saw them. Passengers, dozens of them. Pale, watching, waiting, and at the center, Grayson holding his pocket watch, smiling. It was ticking now. I checked my phone. One notification. Rescheduled. Next departure. 11:55. Tonight. The train comes for everyone. Even me. Especially me. The only thing left to wonder is, will I board next time or will something else walk in my place? You ever walk into a place that feels like it's waiting for you? That's how it was with Blackthorn Manor. I didn't know its name then. Not really. Just that it was the broken-down house on the edge of town, where the fog sat heavy, like it had weight to it. I was 12, and that summer in Hollow's End felt colder than most winters. Mom said it was climate change, but I don't think she really believed that. Nobody talked much about the manor. They just called it the garden, house. Like if they said more, it might hear them. It started with a letter, slipped under our door one morning, folded neat and tied with a fraying green ribbon. No envelope, just my name, Alara Voss, written in handwriting that reminded me of crawling vines. Mom said it was probably junk mail, tossed it on the counter, like it didn't hum when you touched it. That night, I read it in the bathroom with the door locked and the shower running so she couldn't hear me tear it open. The paper smelled like dirt, like something freshly buried. It said, "Come see what still grows. The garden remembers. Bring your hands." I don't know why I went. Maybe it was because nobody ever invited me anywhere. Maybe it was the way the trees near the manor seemed to lean a little toward the path like they wanted me there too. Or maybe it was because of Grandma. She died the winter I was 6, but I remembered the smell of her garden gloves and how she used to whisper to her roses, like they were old friends. Sometimes when I stood in our backyard and closed my eyes, I could hear her voice again. Not words, just that soft hum. I missed her more than I knew how to say out loud. The first time I walked to Blackthorn Manor, it didn't feel like trespassing. The iron gate creaked open before I touched it. Vines slithered back like curtains, revealing a cobblestone path swallowed by moss and damp leaves. The air was thick, like breathing through a wet towel, and the cold snapped at my skin, even though it was July. I didn't see her at first. The gardener. Just rows of flowers that shouldn't have been blooming. Foxglove, lavender, bleeding hearts. Roses darker than dried blood. Every color was too deep, too alive. I touched a violet, and it leaned into my palm. That's when I heard her voice. "You have her touch," it said, like wind rustling through cattails. She taught them to grow. I turned so fast I tripped over a root. She stood between 2 rose bushes, tall and thin, wrapped in a shawl the color of mildew. Her sun hat drooped over her face, and when she lifted it, her eyes were all pupil, no white. Her skin looked wrong. Not pale, not sick. More like it had forgotten what light was. "You're early," she said, tilting her head. "But they're eager. They remember you." I didn't ask who they were. I didn't want to know yet. She held out a rusted pair of pruning shears, and my fingers moved before my brain caught up. The metal bit into my palm. A drop of blood slipped into the soil and the ground shivered. That was the first time I heard the earth breathe. And I swear, somewhere deep under that twisted soil, something whispered my name. The next morning, I couldn't get the smell of soil off my hands. No matter how hard I scrubbed, that scent clung, wet earth mixed with something sweeter, almost metallic, like pennies left in the rain. I kept catching myself sniffing my fingers during breakfast like some kind of weirdo. Mom noticed. She always noticed. "You rolling around in the yard again?" she asked, half laughing as she slid a slice of dry toast onto my plate. "I was gardening," I said. The lie came out too fast, too practiced. She paused just long enough for it to mean something. "You hate dirt," she said. "Always have." I didn't say anything. I chewed the toast and let her drop it. By lunchtime, I was back at Blackthorn Manor. It was like my feet knew the way. Now, past the old post office with the boarded-up windows, across the broken sidewalk with the manhole cover that always hissed steam. The town felt grayer the closer you got to the edge, like color had just given up. The iron gates didn't squeal this time. They opened before I touched them, slower, quieter. The air inside the garden was still cold, but now it felt expectant, like it had paused just for me. The flowers leaned a little when I passed, not toward the sun, toward me. She was waiting. The gardener sat on a wooden stool, pruning a hedge shaped like a woman kneeling. The clippers moved too fast to follow, her hands barely flickering. When she looked up, she smiled like something remembering how teeth worked. "Cut too deep, it dies," she said. "Cut too shallow, it forgets why it grew." I didn't know what to say, so I sat on the damp bench across from her. The wood sagged under me, groaning like it hadn't held weight in 100 years. "You hear them yet?" she asked without looking. "Hear who?" She nodded toward the soil. "The roots. They remember. Old bones do too." Something moved beneath the dirt. A subtle ripple, like something shifting in its sleep. "I'm not scared," I said. It came out as a whisper. "No," she said. "You're curious. That's worse." Then she handed me a trowel and pointed to a patch of dead grass by the statue of a little girl holding a bird cage. Her face was cracked, like real stone, and her eyes followed me when I moved. "Dig," the gardener said. I knelt and pressed the trowel into the soil. It gave way too easily, like the dirt had been waiting. The deeper I dug, the colder it got. At 6 inches down, I hit something. Wood. I froze. My breath puffed in front of me like it was winter. The gardener didn't speak, just nodded once. I scraped away more soil, hands shaking. It was a box, maybe the size of a shoebox, but old, warped and soft at the corners. There was a ribbon tied around it, green, frayed, like the one from the letter. I looked at her. She said nothing. I opened it. Inside were dried petals. Hundreds of them. Each one paper-thin, curled gray. In the middle sat a tiny porcelain doll with black thread for hair and its eyes stitched shut. "Your grandmother left pieces behind," the gardener said. "She planted them carefully. You've found one." My mouth was dry. "This is hers?" She smiled again. "It's yours now." I didn't want to take it, but I couldn't leave it there either. My hands closed around the box. From somewhere, deep in the trees, laughter echoed, childish, hollow, and far too close. The gardener stood. "They're watching now." I looked toward the sound and saw the silhouettes, small figures backlit by mist, feet just inches off the ground. The hollow children, they didn't speak. Not yet. They just watched. Waiting. The next day, the garden felt wrong. It wasn't the dead grass or the shriveled flowers that made me uneasy. It was the silence. The kind of silence that felt like a weight pressing against my chest. It was the way the air seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I didn't want to go back, not at first. But when I woke up that morning, my fingers ached. Not from the trowel, but from the memory of the box. The porcelain doll, its stitched eyes staring into me like it knew more than it should. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just opened a door I shouldn't have, and I couldn't leave it alone. So I grabbed my jacket and left before Mom could ask too many questions. It wasn't like she ever really noticed me anymore. Not since Dad had been gone. She was always too busy or too tired. I guess it was easier that way for both of us. The path to Blackthorn Manor seemed shorter than before, like I was being pulled toward it. I didn't like that feeling, but I couldn't help it. When I reached the gates, they were open again, but this time the air smelled wrong. A strange sweetness hung in the breeze, like rotten fruit left too long in the sun. It didn't seem like it belonged in the garden, not with the frost still clinging to the ground. The gardener was gone. I walked through the garden, my boots crunching on the frost-covered dirt. The leaves, usually so lush, looked withered. The roses that had bloomed the day before were now just twisted stems, as if they'd been drained of life overnight. I stood by the little statue, the one with the girl holding the birdcage. The same figure from the day before, only now her face looked different, more hollow, more expectant, as if she was waiting for something to happen. And then I heard it. The laughter. It was faint at first, like the distant sound of children playing. But it grew louder, closer, and I realized with a cold shiver running down my spine that it wasn't coming from the garden anymore. It was coming from inside the house. I didn't want to go in, but my feet weren't listening. They carried me through the garden, past the roses, the twisted vines, the statues, until I stood at the front door of Blackthorn Manor. It was ajar, the same way it had been the first time I'd seen it. Only now there was something more. A faint, whispering sound. Like wind in the trees, but too human. I stepped inside. The air in the house was stale, heavy with dust and the scent of something sour, like old wood and rot. The floor creaked beneath me as I moved, but there was no sound from the house itself. No creaks, no groans, no voices. Only the laughter now echoing through the empty halls. I took another step forward, and that's when I saw them. The hollow children. They were standing at the top of the staircase, their eyes wide and glowing in the dim light. Their faces were pale, almost translucent, and their feet hovered just above the ground like they were being held up by invisible strings. I could see right through them, like they weren't fully there, like they were nothing more than memories trapped in this house. One of them, a girl with tangled hair and a torn dress, looked straight at me. Her mouth stretched into a smile, but it was wrong. It was too wide, too sharp. The edges of her lips cracked, revealing teeth that were too big, too crooked. "Come, play," she whispered, her voice like leaves rustling in the wind. "Come stay." I backed away, heart hammering in my chest. But the laughter didn't stop. It grew louder until it was deafening, until it felt like the walls themselves were shaking with it. Suddenly, the gardener's voice cut through the noise. "Ilara," she called, her voice softer now, distant. "Don't listen to them." I turned, but she wasn't in the hallway anymore. She was standing at the end of the garden, just outside, her sun hat tilted at an odd angle. Her hands were empty, but I could feel the weight of her gaze. "Leave them be," she said, her voice low, as if she was trying to keep me from hearing the children's calls. "They're not yours to play with." I didn't understand what she meant. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help myself. My feet were moving again, drawn toward the children, toward their laughter, toward the pull of something I couldn't name. I stopped just before I reached them. The girl with the torn dress smiled again, her lips peeling back farther. "Stay," she said, louder this time, her voice crackling with something dark. "Grow with us." The earth beneath me trembled. I turned and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the gate, my heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to claw its way out. The laughter still echoed in my ears, and even though I was out of the house, out of the garden, I couldn't shake it. It followed me like a shadow, like something that had gotten too close and now refused to leave. The garden, the house, the children. It all felt so real and yet somehow not real enough. like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. But I wasn't dreaming. I was awake. I knew I was. The gate slammed shut behind me, but the sound didn't stop. It lingered in my head the way the wind howls when it's ready to tear everything apart. It felt like the earth itself was whispering my name, urging me to come back, to look again. But I didn't want to go back. I was scared. I was terrified, and yet I couldn't help it. I couldn't leave it alone. The garden had changed me. It had touched something in me, something I didn't know I had, and now it was pulling me back. A force I couldn't fight. I had to get away. I had to go home. But by the time I turned around, the town was already gone. Or maybe it was me that had disappeared. I hadn't realized it at first. The road had looked the same. The houses on either side of me, the streetlights flickering. But when I turned the corner, the road just ended. There was nothing but trees. Nothing but the thick, dense fog that had rolled in as if it had been waiting for me. I didn't know where I was anymore. I was standing in front of the garden again. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I'd only taken a few steps toward the iron gates before the storm started. At first it was just the wind, a soft whisper through the trees, but then it grew louder, stronger. The kind of wind that howls like it's mourning something, like it's warning you. The sky turned black and the first drop of rain hit the dirt. But it wasn't water. It was cold, too cold, like it was made of ice. A chill ran through me, deep into my bones, and I shuddered, feeling the weight of it. This wasn't a storm that came with the change of the season. This storm was waiting for something, and I realized it was waiting for me. I looked up at the sky, but there were no stars, no moon, just a thick, suffocating darkness. The trees around me started to sway, the branches bending under the force of the wind, creaking like they might break. The hollow children. They were back. I could hear them now, their whispers carried on the wind, their voices high-pitched and sweet. "Come play," they sang, their words like a lullaby sung backward. "Come stay." I covered my ears, but the voices didn't stop. They were inside my head, in my blood, in the very air I breathed. It was too much, too loud, too close. I needed to get out of here. I needed to go home, but I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the ground. Then from the corner of my eye, I saw her, the gardener. She was standing in the middle of the garden, her hands outstretched, as if she were waiting for something. The air around her shimmered with something dark, something that wasn't quite natural. Her sun hat was gone, her hair falling in thick, tangled strands around her face, but her eyes were the same. Hollow. Empty. "Come," she whispered, though her voice was drowned out by the wind. "Come, Ilara. Let it take root." The rain started to fall harder, heavier, and the wind screamed, the trees bending further under the pressure. But I couldn't look away from her. She was calling me, her voice a thread through the chaos, and I knew that if I stepped forward, if I let myself go, I'd be hers forever. I could feel it. I could feel the ground pulling it, me, the roots reaching out, ready to claim me. But then I saw something else. The roses. The garden had changed. The flowers that had been wilting, the ones that had fallen into decay, were now alive. The petals were bloated and swollen, glistening with an unnatural shine. But it wasn't dew. It was blood. The roses thrashed in the wind like they were alive, their thorns reaching toward me, writhing like snakes in the soil. The ground seemed to tremble beneath my feet as if it were breathing, and the vines were moving. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. A voice, stronger than the others, whispered again, but this time it was mine. A voice I didn't recognize, but I knew it was mine. "Stay," it said. "You belong here." I took a step. I didn't realize I was moving until I was standing at the edge of the garden. My hands were trembling, my skin prickling with a cold that didn't belong. It wasn't just the storm. It was something deeper, something older, something the garden had been waiting for. I was only a few steps from the iron gate, but I couldn't remember how I had gotten here. I glanced around. The trees had stopped moving. The wind had died. The air was still like the moment right before a storm breaks. The faint glow of twilight made everything seem distant, unreal, as if the world was holding its breath. And then, I heard her voice again. "Come, Ilara. Come and stay." I didn't look at her. I couldn't, but I could feel the pull. She was near. I could almost smell the earth on her, the decayed petals clinging to her. I wasn't sure if I was afraid of her, or if I was afraid of the way she made me feel. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a creeping certainty that everything in this town had been leading to this moment. The hollow children were still laughing, their voices high and haunting, floating on the air around me. "Come, play, come stay, come grow," they sang, their words weaving through the storm. It wasn't music anymore. It was a command. They weren't inviting me to play. They were demanding that I join them. I could feel the thorns creeping toward me, the air thickening with something that wasn't quite alive. I was no longer in control of my body. My feet dragged forward step by step, until the ground beneath me felt soft and pliable. The roses were all around me now, their petals glowing an unnatural shade of red, the color of fresh blood. Their stems twisted around the base of the garden, thick and gnarled, growing higher and higher, the thorns like knives ready to slice through flesh. I could hear them, the flowers, whispering. Their voices were faint at first, but as I stepped deeper into the garden, they became clearer. "You're one of us now," they whispered. "You'll stay with us, Ilara." The world around me spun, the ground shifting beneath me, and I stumbled. My hand shot out to steady myself, but instead of feeling the cool metal of the gate, I found the wet earth. My fingers sank into the soft, pulsing soil. The ground felt alive in a way that no earth should ever feel. I tried to pull my hand back, but something in the soil held tight, pulling me deeper. The vines were thick now, tangled around my ankles, my wrists, my neck. They hissed with anticipation. The ground beneath me seemed to breathe with every pull, like it was hungry. I looked down at my hands, the soil caking under my nails, and saw something that made my heart stop. Roots. Black, thick roots snaking out from the soil, weaving their way into my flesh. The garden was feeding on me. I screamed, but the sound was lost in the wind that had picked up again. The garden was alive now, no longer a place but a thing, a monstrous, breathing thing. The gardener was standing before me, her face too pale, her eyes wide and empty. Her mouth stretched into a smile that wasn't kind. "You'll never leave," she whispered. "The garden keeps what it loves, and it loves you." I gasped for air, but my chest felt tight, like something was squeezing the breath from me. The hollow children were closer now, their laughter louder, closer, their faces pressed against the windows of my mind. They were waiting for me to give in, and I knew that's what they wanted. Me to become part of this place. To become part of the garden, to grow with the roses, to live forever in the dirt. I could feel the roots digging deeper, spreading through me, taking hold of my bones. The thorns bit into my flesh, drawing blood. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. But somewhere deep inside me, I found a spark of resistance. It wasn't much, just a flicker of something that still remembered what it was like to be human, to be free. I wasn't going to let it take me. Not yet. Not like this. With everything I had left, I pulled. I wrenched my hands out of the soil, my feet from the roots. It felt like tearing my soul from my body, but I did it. I forced myself up, my legs trembling beneath me. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. The garden screamed as I left, a sound like the wind, like 1,000 voices, all calling my name. I could feel it trying to pull me back, trying to drag me into the earth, but I kept running. I ran until my legs gave out, until my breath was ragged, until the ground behind me was just a blur, a memory. When I finally collapsed on the road, I looked up. The fog had started to clear. The town was just ahead, but the garden was still there, waiting. I don't know how long I lay there. I don't know if it was minutes or hours, but when I finally stood, I found myself staring at the garden one last time, and then I walked away. My hands shake as I write this, but it's not just age. The years have ravaged my body, yes, but it's the memories that keep me awake at night. The ones that crawl under your skin and gnaw at your thoughts, like an itch that never goes away. I haven't spoken of them in years, but now, after what happened yesterday, I can't hold it in anymore. The truth needs to be told, even if it costs me my peace. Blackthorn, Vermont, isn't much of a town. It's dying, really, just like the mill that used to power the town's soul. The buildings are half empty, their windows boarded up, and the streets are quieter than they've ever been. The sun sets too early here, and the air smells like damp earth and something older, something buried too deep to be forgotten. It's the kind of place where the past never stays dead. I've spent most of my life here, and if I'm honest, I thought I'd die here too. I've lived long enough to see the mill close down, the families pack up, and the young ones leave for better opportunities. But even as I've watched the town shrink, the memories have only grown louder. They've always been there, buried in my mind, but now they're clawing their way to the surface. I was part of the original burial committee, the group of men who sealed the time capsule in 1973. At the time, it seemed like a good idea. Something to commemorate the town's history. A way to leave behind something for future generations to remember us by. We thought it was just a vault, just a simple container to hold our memories, our small relics of a dying town. But we were wrong. We were so wrong. The capsule was sealed under the Blackthorn Monument, a granite obelisk that stands at the center of the town square. It's a monument to the past, they say. But if the people only knew what was really buried beneath it, they wouldn't be celebrating. The Blackthorn Monument isn't a memorial, it's a tomb that's been waiting for the right time to open. Yesterday was the 50th anniversary of the capsule being sealed, and the town had gathered for a celebration. The mayor gave his speech about honoring the past, his eyes darting nervously toward the monument's base as he spoke. I saw it. He knew. He knew something was wrong, just like I did. The earth around the monument had sunken slightly, and there was a crack in the base as if something had been digging its way out. I could feel it. The hunger was back. I don't know how it started, how we let it get so far. The hunger, the thing we had promised to feed, the thing that had been sealed away with the capsule. It's a force older than Blackthorn itself, something that's been here longer than the town, longer than the mill, longer than anything we can comprehend. But that's a story for later. For now, you need to know that when they pried open the capsule, my heart stopped. I had expected to see the usual, yellowed newspapers, the class photo of the kids from 1973, a vial of ink, maybe a few letters and trinkets. What I didn't expect was the small finger-bone-thin key that was tucked into the corner of the capsule. I didn't recognize it, and neither did anyone else. The mayor's face went pale when he saw it. That's when I knew. The vault wasn't just for memories. It was a larder. The crowd began to murmur as the contents spilled out onto the ground. The newspapers were brittle, their pages curling at the edges. The class photo was there, its faces frozen in time, but it was the vial of black liquid that got everyone's attention. It wasn't supposed to be there. The mayor's expression went from curious to horrified in the span of a heartbeat. He knew what it was. I could see it in his eyes. But there was more. I hadn't seen it at first, buried underneath the papers. The town ledger from 1973. Its pages were stained with rust-brown fingerprints. My fingerprints. I don't know why I didn't say anything then. Maybe I didn't want to cause a scene, or maybe I didn't want to face the truth myself. But I saw that ledger and I saw the key. I knew exactly what was happening, and I knew it was too late to stop it. As the contents of the capsule were spread across the ground, my heart raced in my chest. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, their excitement turning into something more, like unease. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, watching, waiting for me to say something, but I couldn't speak. I was frozen in place, staring at the objects scattered before me, each one tugging at a memory I wasn't ready to face. The key. It was so small, delicate, almost fragile in the way it sat on the ground next to the vial of black liquid. I had seen that key before, though I'd been too young to understand what it meant back in 1973. But I knew now. I knew what it was. And I knew that the mayor knew it too. He had been there with me, part of the burial committee, part of the promise we made all those years ago. We had buried the thing in the vault. We thought it would be sealed away forever. But the earth was moving now. The cracks were widening. The hunger was waking up. I glanced at the mayor, his eyes darting nervously between the crowd and the cracked monument. His mouth opened as though he was about to speak, but then he stopped, his face going pale. The look in his eyes, fear, guilt, regret, told me everything I needed to know. He had been hoping it wouldn't come to this. But it was too late. The thing beneath Blackthorn was hungry again. The crowd was restless now, pressing in around. The spilled contents of the capsule. A child, a little girl, walked forward, her small hand reaching down toward the key. It was almost as if something was pulling her toward it, a force too strong for her to resist. She picked it up without hesitation, holding it in her palm as the crowd fell silent. And then, it happened. The ground beneath the monument trembled. At first, it was just a slight vibration, something that could have been written off as an earthquake, maybe a shift in the earth beneath the old granite. But then the tremor grew, spreading outward like a ripple in water, and the monument groaned, a deep, unnatural sound that made my bones ache. The earth around the obelisk cracked further, the fissures running deep into the soil, and the town, square, seemed to shift beneath our feet. I stumbled back, my hands shaking as I watched in disbelief. The monument, the thing we thought was just a memorial, was moving. I had no time to think. The ground split open. Beneath the monument, a hidden compartment began to reveal itself, sliding open like a tomb cracking open after centuries of confinement. And inside, 7 pairs of shoes, neatly arranged. The shoes of the vanished. 7 people had disappeared the night the time capsule was sealed, their bodies never found. At the time, it was chalked up as a strange coincidence, a group of missing townsfolk who had gone off in search of something more than Blackthorn could offer. But we all knew the truth deep down. They hadn't just vanished. They had been taken. I stared at the shoes, the faces of the missing flashing through my mind. Old friends, neighbors, people I had known since childhood. They had walked these streets, lived their lives here, and now they were gone, lost too. Whatever had been sealed beneath the earth. The shoes were ordinary. Brown leather boots, faded sneakers, worn sandals. But they weren't just shoes, they were symbols, reminders. The town's forgotten sacrifice. And then, something worse happened. The tape recorder. It hadn't been there before. It wasn't part of the original capsule's contents, but somehow, it had ended up next to the ledger as if it had been placed there just for us to find. I knew what it was the moment I saw it. The very same tape recorder we had used back in 1973 to document the sealing of the capsule. The one that had recorded everything we had said when we buried the vault, and when it clicked on, the world seemed to stop. The faint, crackling hiss from the recorder grew louder as the voice, clear and cold, emerged from the static. "You promised you'd feed it. You promised." The crowd gasped. The air in the square went still. People looked at each other, confused, frightened, as the voice echoed through the speakers of the old machine. I could hear it in my own mind now, replaying the words from so long ago. We had promised. We had promised to feed it. The hunger had always been there, buried beneath Blackthorn, hidden from the rest of the world, but not from us. And now it was awake. The crowd was beginning to panic, a collective murmur of fear rising around us. People were backing away, some stumbling, others pushing to get out of the square. But they wouldn't escape. No one would. Tried to move, tried to do something, anything, but I felt rooted to the spot, my legs like stone. I glanced around frantically, my eyes landing on the shoes. 7 pairs, untouched, waiting. Waiting for the next sacrifice, and that's when I heard it. The scraping noise deep beneath the earth, as though something was clawing its way up from the ground, from the very heart of Blackthorn. The obelisk groaned again, louder this time, the stone splitting wide open, And there, beneath the monument, the hidden vault was fully revealed. 7 empty spaces, 7 missing townsfolk, the ones who had fed the hunger, the ones who had disappeared. And now, it was our turn. The town square was alive with panic. People ran in all directions, their faces twisted in terror as the ground beneath their feet shook violently. The tremors seemed to travel through the earth like a living thing, undulating, pulsing in time with the crack of the monument splitting open. It was as if the earth itself was alive, reaching out, clawing at us, demanding something in return. I could hear the murmurs, the shouts, the frantic calls of people trying to flee, but they were drowned out by the low, grinding noise that came from the monument. The hunger was back. The voice from the tape recorder still echoed in my mind, the words playing on a loop. "You promised you'd feed it, you promised." I could feel the weight of the words pressing on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I had tried to bury the memory of what happened in 1973. I had tried to forget what we had done. But now, standing in the middle of the town square, watching as the monument cracked further open, I realized that there was no escaping it, no running from the past. I stumbled backward, my eyes fixed on the shoes, the 7 pairs, perfectly arranged beneath the monument. I knew who they belonged to, each pair telling a story of a person who had disappeared the night we sealed the vault. I could hear their voices in my mind, their faces flashing through my memories. They hadn't just vanished. They had been taken by whatever lay beneath Blackthorn. The air grew colder, the wind picking up in a violent gust, but it wasn't just the wind. It was something else, something older, something that had been waiting for this moment. I could feel it stirring, an ancient force pushing its way to the surface, hungry for what we had promised it. I glanced at the mayor, his face ashen, his eyes wide with fear. He stood frozen, his gaze locked on the monument, his body stiff with the weight of whatever secret we had buried together all those years ago. I could see the guilt in his eyes. He knew what was happening. He had known all along. He had helped. "Bury it, Walt," he said, his voice shaking. We didn't think it would come to this. We thought it was gone." His words were a whisper, barely audible over the rising hum of energy filling the square. I couldn't respond. I couldn't find my voice. My legs felt like they were made of stone, my body paralyzed by the terror that gripped me. I turned away from him, my eyes searching the crowd. People were still running, still trying to escape. But I knew it was pointless. It was too late. The hunger had awoken, and it wasn't going to stop until it had what it wanted. The ground trembled again, the cracks in the monument widening, the stone groaning as though it were alive. I could hear the scraping noise now, louder, closer, as though something was pushing its way up through the earth, through the very foundation of Blackthorn. And then I saw it. From beneath the monument, something began to emerge. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark mass creeping up from the depths. But as it rose, I could make out the shape of it, tall, skeletal, with long, gnarled limbs. The figure seemed to stretch upward, impossibly long, its body twisting and writhing as it broke free from the earth. Its skin was a sickly gray, covered in cracks, like dried mud. And its face was empty, hollow. No eyes, no mouth, just a blank, featureless void. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. I could only stare in horror as the thing slowly pulled itself free from the monument, its form becoming more solid with every passing second. It was taller than any man, its shape distorted and unnatural, like something that didn't belong in this world. Its presence radiated an energy I couldn't comprehend, a force so dark, so ancient, that I could feel it clawing at the edges of my mind, trying to take root in my thoughts. "Feed it." The voice whispered again, low and guttural, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was inside my head, a cold whisper that made my skin crawl. I looked around, but no one else seemed to hear it. The crowd had gone silent, their faces frozen in terror as they watched the figure rise from the earth. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was the mayor. He was shaking, his eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Fear, regret, and maybe something worse. "Walt," he said again, his voice breaking. "It's your turn now. You promised. You're the last one left." I turned to him, the weight of his words sinking into my chest. The hunger wasn't just a force, it was a deal. A pact we had made long ago to keep Blackthorn alive, to keep the mill running, to keep the town from disappearing entirely. We had given it what it wanted, 7 lives, 7 sacrifices. And now it was time to fulfill the final promise. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The only thing that mattered now was the thing standing before me, waiting, watching. It wasn't going to stop, not until it had what it was owed. The mayor's face twisted with guilt and fear, his lips trembling as he stepped back. "Walt, we agreed. You were the one who said it would be you when the time came. You have to feed it." I took a step back, my mind racing. The last entry in my journal, the one I had written in 1973 before the vault was sealed, the one I had buried with the capsule. It all came rushing back now, our deal, our promise. We thought we had buried it, sealed it away for good. But we hadn't. It was waiting. And now it was my turn to pay. I turned, my heart pounding, my legs unsteady as I stumbled away from the crowd. I didn't look back as I walked toward the edge of the square, toward the place where it all began. I could hear the scraping again, louder now, and the sound of something wet and heavy slithering through the earth beneath me. The hunger was here, and I was its final sacrifice. I could feel it closing in behind me. The town of Blackthorn was dying, and it was taking all of us with it. I had always thought the hunger was just a metaphor, some strange superstition passed down through generations, a tale meant to explain the unexplainable disappearances in Blackthorn. A town like ours, forgotten and withering, needs stories to survive, stories about ghosts and old curses and things buried beneath the earth. It was easy to believe in something like that when the town itself seemed on the verge of vanishing into the past. But standing there, watching the thing, the hunger, rise from beneath the monument, I realized how wrong I had been. This wasn't folklore. This wasn't a ghost story. This was real. Too real. I moved slowly, my legs shaking, the weight of the entire town pressing down on me. It felt like I was walking through molasses, each step dragging me deeper into the suffocating silence of Blackthorn Square. The mayor's words echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of the pact I had made with something that shouldn't exist. "You promised," he had said, his voice trembling. "You have to feed it." The town had been dying long before I was born. The mill closed down when I was a boy, and the last of the families who could afford to leave had disappeared. The rest of us had stayed behind, trying to hold on to whatever scraps of life we could. But the hunger, that thing beneath Blackthorn, it had been there, feeding off the town's despair, keeping it alive in some twisted way. I had promised. I had promised when I was young, desperate to save the town. We had all made that promise. The burial committee, every single one of us. We thought it would stay buried, sealed away forever, just like the time capsule we had carefully lowered into the earth. We thought the thing would be content with its meal, content with the sacrifices we had made. But now, I saw how naive we had been. The hunger didn't end. It just waited. It always waited. The ground continued to tremble, and the scraping grew, louder, more insistent, like nails dragging on a chalkboard, but deeper, far deeper beneath the earth. I turned back toward the monument, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The massive crack in the stone had grown, widening with every tremor. The earth around the base of the monument was sinking, the ground warping and shifting as though it were breathing. The thing was coming. I was supposed to stop it. I had always thought I would be the one to stop it when the time came, the one who would right the wrong we had done. But standing there, watching the town unravel around me, I realized that wasn't how it worked. It was never going to end. The hunger would always be there, waiting, feeding, growing stronger. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. The streets were empty now. Everyone had fled, their homes abandoned in their haste to escape whatever nightmare was unfolding in the square. But I couldn't leave. Not now. Not when I had been the one who promised, the one who had sealed this fate. I stepped closer to the monument, my eyes drawn to the 7 pairs of shoes that lay beneath the cracked stone. They had once belonged to the vanished, those who had been taken. Their families had mourned them, had lived their lives in quiet sorrow, but they hadn't understood.
They didn't know the price we had paid. The shoes weren't just left behind, they were symbols, reminders, tokens of the deal we had made. The hunger had been fed, but it had never been satisfied. Not completely. It had waited, and now it was,
coming for the rest of us. I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of the years pressing down on me. I could hear the scraping growing louder now, closer. Whatever was buried beneath Blackthorn was pushing its way to the surface, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. It wasn't just the town that was at stake. It was the entire valley. The land itself was being consumed by whatever force lay beneath it. A voice broke through the deafening noise, the sound of someone calling my name.
It was the mayor, standing just behind me, his face pale, his eyes wide with desperation. "Walt," he said, his voice barely audible over the noise. "You have to do it. You promised." I turned to face him, my mind a blur of fear and guilt. He was shaking, but I could see the resolve in his eyes. He had been as much a part of the pact as I had, but now that it was time to fulfill it, I could see the regret in his face. "We can't go on like this," I said, my voice hoarse. "We've given everything. The town is dying. The hunger, it's never been enough. It will never stop." "You don't understand," the mayor pleaded.
"If we don't feed it, if we don't fulfill the promise, it'll take more. It will take everything." I looked back at the monument, my gaze falling on the shoes, the faces of the vanished flickering in my mind. The hunger was real. It had always been real. And now it was demanding its due. The mayor was right. We couldn't stop it. We had made this deal, and now it was time to fulfill it. I stepped forward, my hands trembling as I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out the small, finger-bone-thin key, the one that had been hidden in the capsule, the one I had kept with me all these years. The key to the vault, to the hunger beneath Blackthorn. The earth trembled again, louder this time, and I felt the weight of the town's history pressing down on me. This was it.
This was the moment when everything we had buried would rise again. I held the key in my hand, feeling its coldness against my skin, and I knew, deep down, that there was no way out. The pact had been made long ago, and now it was time to pay.
Walked toward the monument, my steps slow, deliberate, knowing that once I inserted the key, once I unlocked the vault, there would be no turning back.
The hunger would be fed, but at what cost? The key clicked into place, and then the ground opened. The hunger had come home. The key turned in my hand with a sound that seemed too loud for the silence surrounding us. It clicked into place, and the
ground beneath me shook violently as if it had finally had enough of our feeble attempts to keep it at bay.
I felt the weight of the earth shift, the deep gnawing pull of something ancient awakening from a slumber too long undisturbed. The monument groaned, the cracks widening further, and for the briefest moment, I thought I could hear the thrum of its hunger, vibrating through the stone beneath my feet. The mayor, his eyes wide and fearful, took a step back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Walt, you don't have to do this," he said, his voice cracking. But it was too late for
words, too late for excuses. There was nothing left but the truth. The promise we had made in 1973 wasn't just a foolish whim. It was a pact sealed in desperation, born from the desire to save a dying town. We had been foolish enough to think we could control the hunger beneath Blackthorn, to think that giving it the life of 7 people would somehow quench it. But it hadn't. And now, here we were, facing the inevitable. I pressed the key into the small hidden compartment beneath the monument, and for a moment, nothing happened. The earth around us was silent, too quiet, as though the town itself was holding its breath. Then, with a sound like thunder, the monument gave way. Stone cracked and crumbled, falling into the earth as the ground split wide open, revealing a dark, yawning abyss beneath it. The smell hit me first, a heavy, rotten stench, like the decay of centuries. It wasn't just the smell of old earth.
It was something far worse, something more sinister. The air grew thick with it, cloying, suffocating, as though the very essence of Blackthorn had been tainted, infected by whatever lay below. I stepped back instinctively, but my feet felt like
they were stuck to the ground. The sound from the depths grew louder, a low, grinding hiss followed by something else, something wet and slithering, dragging itself toward us from the bowels of the earth. The noise was sickening, unnatural, like the crawling of something that had never known light or air, and then it emerged. At first I thought it was just a shadow, a flicker in the dark. But as it rose, I saw it clearly. A grotesque, twisting form, long and serpentine, its skin slick and dark like wet leather. Its limbs were spindly and elongated, joints cracking as it moved, its body unfurling like a snake that had been waiting for years to shed its skin. Its face was a void, a blackened mask with jagged openings where its eyes should have been, and a mouth that stretched too wide, splitting its face open in a grotesque grin. The hunger. It had no shape, no true form. It was a thing of darkness,
of unspeakable void, a creature born from the deepest corners of the earth, from the very heart of Blackthorn's cursed land.
It was ancient, older than the town itself, and it had been fed on the desperation of the people who had once called this place home. But it wasn't satisfied. It would never be satisfied. The ground continued to rumble, and the earth around us seemed to shift as though it too was hungry. From the blackness beneath the monument, I saw shapes moving, shadows, figures emerging from the pit, the missing townsfolk, the ones we had fed to the hunger. They were nothing more than twisted, empty shells now, their faces distorted, their bodies writhing in the darkness, as though they were being pulled back into the depths from which they had come. The hunger wasn't just a creature, it was a cycle of death and rebirth fed by our sacrifices, by the lives we had given it. We had thought we were saving the town by feeding it. We had been wrong. I turned to the mayor, but there was nothing left in his face but terror. His mouth opened to speak, but no words came out. He was trembling, his body shaking violently. And I knew then that he too understood the weight of what we had done. It had always been too late.
It had always been too late to stop it. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't look at anyone. The hunger was here, and nothing could contain it now. As I turned to run, I heard the mayor's voice behind me, weak and pleading. "Walt, we
can't..." But his words were drowned out by the sound of the earth splitting wide open, by the shriek of something terrible, something beyond comprehension. The sky above us darkened, the sun completely blocked out by the rising shadow.
I could hear the whispers in the air, the voices of the past, of those we had sacrificed, their cries mixing with the roar of the hunger that now consumed everything. I ran. My legs carried me as fast as they could, but I didn't know where I
was going. The town was gone, swallowed by the hunger. There would be no survivors, there would be no escape. Blackthorn had been marked, chosen to feed, and it would never be free. I ran through the empty streets, past the crumbling houses, past the hollow remnants of a town that had once lived. But as I looked back, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The Blackthorn monument was gone. In its place was a hole, deep and dark, as though the earth had swallowed it whole. And from below, from the depths of the earth, I heard a wet, clicking sound. It echoed through the valley, crawling through the silence like a heartbeat. The hunger was still alive. I didn't stop running, but hunger always follows. In the quiet of the night, when the wind blows through the empty streets, you can still hear it, the faint scratching, the wet clicks, the sound of something moving beneath the earth. The hunger isn't gone, it's just waiting. And if you listen closely enough, you'll hear the voices of those who vanished, the ones who fed it. The Town of Blackthorn is gone, but the hunger remains. It always will.